Welcome, welcome, and good night. Yes, good night. It's it's actually Wednesday night, midnight. And tonight we'll be talking a little bit about Penn Relays and the prizes that are on offer at Penn Relays. Should a U.S. high school team receive gold watches at Penn Relays, even if they don't win the race? So that's our topic tonight as we dive into the controversial rule that awards gold watches to the first American school, regardless of their finish position. Is it fair to the true? Is it fair to the true winners? Does it undermine the international competition? Join us for this conversation and drop your comment in the comment section below as we discuss this controversial issue. With me tonight to discuss the issue is Coach Vaughn and Joe. And, that's our panel for tonight as we discuss this controversial rule at Penn Relays where the first U.S. team or first U.S. school team will receive goal watches regardless of where they finish. Whereas the Jamaican or any other international team, they will have to win the relay to get goal watches. Let me first start with your coach, Vaughn. What do you think about this? It's now been seen as the controversial pen relay rules.
I mean, I don't see any controversy. I think it's a good rule. I think it's one that awards inclusivity for the domestic teams, the U.S. domestic teams, such an international flavor for the meet. And I think it also, if you think about it, especially the last one that we just had, where Bullis High School ran a high school record, I think that recognition needed to be spotlighted, and I think it's a good rule. I think it helps to level the quote unquote playing field because I think one of the true things about Penn Relays is that it has a set of rules that's governed by the rules of competition from where you come from, right? So if you qualify for champs, you can run at Penns. If you qualify for whatever it is you do in Trinidad, you qualify for Penns. And sometimes there are gray areas with those rules where it might seem unfair if you're in a high school in the US. So I think it's a good rule to award those teams the watches.
What says you, Joe?
Well, it is like going back to the point. It is a U.S. meet. It originated in the U.S., but I'm old school, so I don't believe giving everybody a trophy is the way, because that's what the problem with society is now. And I came right out on what's the score and said that too the other night. And I think that yes, but then give the next international team a watch too if you're going to do the same thing. If you're going to do that, then give the next international team. I don't care if it's a team from the Bahamas or whatever. It just let them get a watch too. And that's just my take on it. You can agree or disagree.
So you're
But
agreeing and disagreeing at the same time, Joe?
of course, because I agree that the like Coach Vaughn said, it's an American meet. They set the rules. They do that. But put then do it in both directions. You know what I mean? You're built. It's this meet is built on international teams. Trust me. If it wasn't for the Jamaicans, Penn Relays would be nothing. Let me tell you, and I'm going to be tell you that for real. If and I don't gaslight anything. If they didn't have the Jamaicans there, they wouldn't draw the crowd from New York. They wouldn't draw the crowd from New Jersey. They wouldn't draw those teams or those people. They wouldn't draw the audience. That's Jamaicans, and I'm sorry, I'm being like this, but Jamaicans make the Penn Relays happen, and the other international teams. Being honest, and then why? And then let me go to a step further. Why back in the days you used to have consolation small schools, consolation big schools. Now the consolations are separating. They're making it an international consolation meet where you put all the internet. Why? You tell me why. I'll tell you why. Because they were tired of not getting the Jamaican teams. They have the Jamaican teams in the consolations, and they're winning the consolations too.
Because at one point, Joe, based on what I remember, they used to have a small school final and a large school final.
That's what I was saying. They had the Championship of America.
Hmm.
So you had all the best 8 schools in that Championship of America. And then you would take the next fastest small school times into a consolation, and then the big school times into a consolation.
Hmm.
Now it's international. Like if you're a Jamaican team and you would normally qualify, have the ninth best time, let's say, and not make the Championship of America, now you go into an international consolation with all the international schools.
Hmm.
You don't go in. It's just fragmented. It's fragmented. That's what the only way I can say to it.
And Coach Vaughn, what do you think about this one? Where first time, as I mentioned, they used to have the small school finals and the large school finals, and those many times were won by Jamaican teams. What do you think about not having that, but no, they have, apart from the Championship of America finals, they only have an international finals.
No, I don't know if that's truly the case, because I still see from last year's results that they have several other finals, so to speak. They have the independent, they have the prep, they have the suburban,
But
they
they're
have
all U.S. schools.
right, but those are all U.S. schools, but they also have an international section, right? So if Calabar Wolmer's JC, for example, and the team Queens College from Bahamas or wherever they're from did not make that final for the Championship of America, they still get a chance at a wheel, but I don't think they get a gold watch. They may just get a medal and a smaller wheel. They don't get a watch as well.
But they go into the constellations. That's
Right, we
that's
call it consolation, but it's really
international.
but
They go
really
into
international.
international constellations, but back before they were able to compete with the next fastest U.S. schools or other international schools. Now they can't do that.
How far back was this? Because I ran in '91, and we had the international final then.
The
Nah,
international
man.
final, I think,
I
was
coached
just
a team. In fact, we were fourth in the I was at a U.S. school. We were fourth in the Championship of America, and they had it back then. They had that format back then, and in 94, 95. I'm telling you, this just happened a few years back where they started splitting up all these constellations.
Hmm.
And I'll have to do
yeah,
some
yeah,
research on it.
it just happened a few years ago. Up to
Yeah.
I'm thinking maybe up to 4 years ago, you had the small school final, the large school final, and the Championship of America finals.
And that's all you had. You didn't have any of this other type of finals. So anybody that ran for um like you're talking about the New Jersey, New York, or I mean um the Philadelphia area,
Yeah.
they were able to qualify in their qualification rounds for the big school. William Penn did it for years. William
Mhm.
Penn, they qualified out of the Philadelphia area schools and always was in a championship of America.
Mhm. Well, I mean, if that is it, I'm just going off my recollection
Hmm.
and what I've seen over the years. Just visiting the meet on an annual basis, working it from the media standpoint, as well as while I coached in New York. We
Hmm.
brought a team down. It was a college team nonetheless, but I still saw where, and this is early 2000s. I still saw where they were smaller finals. But I think the point is this: if you're gonna have a championship of America race, right? And I guess the argument is saying that, look, if you didn't win, you don't get the spoils, right? And I get that, but again, for me, the whole point is that if it's a U.S. meet and you have a U.S. team that ran really well, and they've traditionally ran really well, it's just that the Jamaican teams have ran quote unquote weller, right? Just
Yeah.
you know, and for that reason, I think that's why they put them in, because if you think about it, those teams, because they qualified in the top 8 or 9 teams that go back to the championship final, they don't get a chance to run any of those other finals with the American teams. So I guess to appease them, or to validate their performance, or their inclusion in the meet, you give them that. Because I think another part of it is this: remember the Penn Relays, like I said, they operate within the sphere of World Athletics, within the sphere of ISA, within the sphere of whatever other bodies of international teams, high school teams that come down to compete. In Jamaica, a kid could be in high school for 6, 7 years easily, sometimes even 8 years. So Penele is realizing this only gives you 4 years to compete. So if you have a freshman at age 14 who is running really well, let's throw a number out there in the quarter mile, 45 seconds of the quarter mile, just for argument's sake. But in Jamaica, he's in class 3 at age 14. That's 1 year.
I
Then he
know
has
what you're
2 years of
saying.
class 2. That's 2 years. Then you have 3 years of class 1. That's another 3 years. So that's 6 years. So this kid could potentially run a Penn Relays for 6 years, right? So Penn Relays say, you know what? Even though it's 6 years you could run in high school in Jamaica, we're going to make it 4 to make it fair across the board. And I think another part about it is different states in the US, based on how old
Have
you are,
different rules.
have different rules.
New York, you can run in 8th grade. You can run in high school.
You could run in high school, right? And the other part is, now when you look at the age of the athletes, right? It's not uncommon to see a kid who's already 19 running at high school champs in Jamaica, right? But that kid who would not qualify for Carifta, which is a youth meet, is running at the high school championships and also qualifies for Penn. But because of his age and when he was born, that kid may not qualify to run in the New York State meet, high school meet.
Right. It's like you in Maryland. If you are 19 before September 1st,
Mhm.
you can't compete. But if you turn 19 on in March, you're still good.
Which
Yeah,
is
and which I like where this conversation is going, because and as
No.
Coach Norman
Okay.
has said, we would have seen where seniors from Jamaica, because once you're going to be 20, once you're going to be 20 in the year of competition. So if you're going to be 20 after September 1, you're still allowed to run at champs in March,
Right.
right? But you can't represent your country at the Carifta Games, and
Right.
you cannot
So
represent your
it's like
country
a
at the World
double
Juniors.
standard type of rule for
Yes.
the world, and then the local.
I
But
remember one year, Joe, one year, some years ago, maybe 10, 15 years ago, the West Indies cricket team had sent maybe 7 to 8 overage players to a
mhm,
youth World Cup. And it's again because these players were playing in the regional high school competitions. And while they were allowed, just like the case in Jamaica, once they're going to turn 20 in the year before before December 31st, you would not be, you're not a junior. And Penn Relays may have realized that this is what is going on. And as Coach Vaughn said earlier, in the US, these athletes, once you're in high school, you're only allowed to run for 4 years. In Jamaica, high school kids could be running at Penn Relays for 6, 7 years.
Hmm.
I agree. And let me tell you something. I remember a case where Edwin Allen got disqualified in a 4x8 years back because a girl ran for 5 years at Penn's. And who turned them in? Who is going to be wicked enough to turn them in?
Coach Joe,
The
I was today.
Jamaicans. And you remember 2 years ago when the kid, I forget what school he's from.
I think it was
He
Kingston College.
Yes, that didn't that came in. He transferred, and it was only a Jamaican would know that rule. That he didn't
Exactly.
come in and get enough credits until the end. Only a
Exactly.
Jamaican, and next thing you know, you hear him disqualified. And I was like, "Look, I'm sitting there to myself. Who would know this Jamaican rule? That's what happened."
Now,
And there
another
were
point.
five. I heard from a good friend of mine and a good source. There
Yeah.
were 4 to 5 Jamaican schools that protested that.
I think that was a very disingenuous protest. They should have just called it a day and let the kid run. It's not that serious. You're not running for points, okay? You're not.
Mm-mm.
So, so
But it was a Jamaican rule, and he was, and
right,
it's and the Penn Relays says it doesn't matter if it's a Penn Relay rule or not. It's by your governing body
right.
that makes the difference.
Yeah, because ISA will have to give its blessing to all the schools and will have to sign off on all the schools that are leaving Jamaica to compete.
Right.
All the high schools that are leaving Jamaica to compete at the Penn Relays. So you'll first have to pass that ISA rule before you are allowed to compete at the Penn Relays.
Now
Yeah. So
let me go back real quick. Hold on,
okay,
coach. Let
go
me go
ahead.
back real quick.
No, man. You're
On,
making some good points.
on the topic of the age, just to drive the point home, I coached in Florida up to about 2 years ago. I think it was in 2017 or 2018. I had a kid who turned 19 on the day of the finals of the state meet. And in Florida at that time, the rule is or was once you turn 19, you are done. It doesn't matter where you turn 19. If you turn 19 in March, you could run high school meets all the way up to that your birthday. So for us, this one kid turned 19 the day of the finals, and he qualified for the final. But because it was a team, there was a team that he was a sprinter that we had to kind of like defensively block another kid out of the meet. We still let him run the heats, knock that kid out. So in the final, our lane was open because that kid aged out. And that was purely strategic. We weren't charged for not showing up or anything like that. But the point is, in different states, 19 at some
Yep.
point, 19 here, 19 there. And in Florida, once you turn 19, it used to be 19.9, but then it just turned to 19. 19 years, 9 months, but it just turned to 19 flat out. So that's why for me, I think it's a good rule for Penn Relays to have where the first US team gets the spoils as if they won a title as well. And I don't think it's like everyone gets a trophy. I just think it just levels it out for us because of so many
Well,
different rules.
going back to a point you made earlier, Bullets ran a national record. If
Right.
you go through that Penn Relays book and you look at national records, some of them, most of them, don't even in the big relays, the 4x1, 4x4, that don't even come close to the Penn Relay records, which is set by Jamaicans. So I see what you're saying there because you set a national record and you couldn't even win.
Yeah. And that's because the Jamaican team that beat you might have a kid who otherwise would be ineligible in Maryland. you know? And I could say
Yeah,
that with my
but
chest because even myself, when I ran in '93, my second time at Penn Relays, I was turning 20 in December. But in Jamaica, I was still eligible in March to run the championships. But I was turning 20 in December. So which made me eligible for Penn Relays because my first time was 2 years before that. But in Florida, I would not be eligible. You see what I'm
Right.
saying?
I hear what you're saying. There's different age limits, but at the same time,
Mm-hmm.
I will say this: there's a lot of strategy that goes on that people don't understand, that doesn't know the don't know the sport. So I know for a fact KC made a leg change. They
Hmm.
switched their order around, and sometimes you put a fresh leg in there that didn't run in the other round. That you have more depth.
Which I believe Penn Relays is a stickler on your lane cards, your relay cards. They
Yeah,
want you to
but they knew
get.
who they were going to replace, what leg they
Hmm.
were going to place, and who they were going to replace it. You know, and then and at the same time that they have the depth. So I mean, I get all that, but a lot of strategy goes on too, and I think the Jamaican teams know and they watch and they're very savvy and know who they're going to put against. They knew Quincy was going to be behind at the end. They knew he was going to be behind at the end. But
Hmm.
guess what? You can't match a 45 when he's that far ahead.
Right.
So that's what happened in that race. They thought that, oh, he's just going to come back and magically pass him. No, man,
Mhm.
you can't pass a 45 when you already have a 2-second lead.
Correct. You,
Yeah.
you know, I was listening to Quincy's coach before Penn Relays, and in 24 they fell in the heats and the final, and still finished second or third.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And coach said, we can't, before this year's Penn Relays, coach said, we can't go off what ifs, because we have to give respect to those other teams in the race. And I think this year proved it, that there was no falls this year for Bullis. They still finished second, but they also ran a US record. So,
Well,
hats off
and I
to
will say to this
technology.
about Quincy. He said we lost fair and square. He did say
Mhm.
that. He came out in a news, in a interview, and he said we lost fair and square. So he's a good humble kid. I mean, it's just that he realizes that he said last year they had an excuse. He said there's no excuses this year.
No excuses.
No,
And it is what it is.
but
It is thing there, and as you said, Quincy also said in that interview I did with him that they were at a meet in Florida, and when they saw the time that won the Jamaican championships, I think he said it was about 2:07, and he said, "Oh, we need to go back, and we're going to have to do some work to get these Jamaicans at Penn Relays."
Yep.
And he said we came to Penn's and we ran two. I think they ran what, Joe, 2:05,
yeah,
and he said we ran
because it
two o
was
five.
203 in
Yeah, we
Paris.
were
Yeah,
beaten, and we lost fair and square. You know,
Mhm.
and as Joe said, he said, we don't have any excuse this time around.
Mhm. But on the issue of the awards, one of the things that's weird to me in my recollection of Penn Relays, we had finished fourth in the 4x4, and we got a medal. And I said, "Why are we getting a medal?" Right? Because we finished fourth. But then I realized they give medals to the top five. Now imagine
yes,
the top five teams are all Jamaican, and then coming in eighth place is an American team, and they get a gold watch. Running
exactly.
312.
But coach, those
Yeah,
little consolation medals are like this small, like this little big small. Because I got
they-
them before. My team has got them before, and they're like little tiny ones.
yeah, but they're in a nice plastic case. You got to
Yeah,
give it up.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
You know,
They come.
case
They
makes it
come.
nice. But I was a little weirded out because coming from Jamaica, there are some meets where only the winners get. And in the past at Florida Relays, only the winners got all the spoils. At Gibson Relays, it was only the winner who got anything. And if you went to the championships, only the top three get medals. Everybody else, you get your points or you get a handshake, and that's that. So it was kind of weird. But then I looked at the landscape of Penn Relays with the number of teams and the international flavor, because I think I've seen teams from Norway in the 4x8 before, or even Poland. I can't remember exactly. And they ran away with that 4x8. So, given credence to that, I think the way that Penn Relays kind of, you know what, look, we have all these different teams coming in. Let's make sure our teams, our domestic teams, feel like they're a part of it. And that's why I support the rule, just to drive that point home.
Yep.
Make a
As I
good
said,
point.
yeah, very good one. And as we said before, Coach Vaughn, Joe alluded to it. We may agree or disagree, but Penn Relays may just want to make sure that an American team leaves with something. I mean, you just can't come here all the time and beating the hell out of these teams without leaving them with anything.
And I think if you think of the season as well, Penn Relays is the cherry on top for many of the high school seniors in Jamaica, right? The high school championships is done. You ran at Carifta. Now it's your last race before you go your external exams, or you walk across the stage as a graduate, move on to the next level, right? And we're in a season, we're in a part of the season where the Jamaican teams have already peaked, holding their peak, or it's a big deal, right? Because there's travel involved. There's so many things involved.
It's a long, long season for them. A
Right.
long season. And
And
then then you add the international showcase on back on the after the Penn
right,
Relays.
that new meet right there. But if you look at it, the US teams, which are mainly from the Northeast, they're just coming outdoors. It's probably their first or second meet outdoor. So they're not in the same kind of shape as the majority of the Jamaican teams are. Because when I look back even at the history of the 4x4, the 4x1s, and so forth, you're going to have like 15 wins over the last 20 years by all Jamaican teams. You're going to have streaks by Jamaican teams, right, which are at the top. Because I was looking at like wondering, why is this difference occurring? And there are several things, because some people are saying bring in the Florida teams, bring in the Texas teams, etc. Can't do that, right? You really can't do that. But considering the season that they're in, you're coming in off an indoor, maybe even spring break, a late spring break. So you're not in that shape for outdoors. And the other thing I noticed with how we set up meets in Florida, maybe the same thing in other parts of the country, we run a lot of relay meets first, and then we get down to the individual events later in the season. And maybe it's the same model in the North. So
No, it's
if you
not. Yeah, you have a couple relays, and
okay,
that's the way. But most of the time, you have a one big relay meet, and then you go to the next thing.
then you go
The
to the
other
next.
thing is in competition with Penn Relays, and I don't know how much it is now because you don't hear much about it. But the Drake Relays,
Mm-hmm.
And as you talk about
Drake
that,
Relays
Joe.
is out in Iowa, and they used to draw a lot of those other teams from out that way.
Now, Joe, as you touch the Jake relay, that was a question I was going to ask. Um, we we have heard we have heard the talk about the Jake's relay. Why Jamaican schools don't target the Jake's relay and stuff like that. Over the Penn Relays, because Jamaican schools, they go to the Penn Relays, they get nothing from the Penn Relays. They go there and they win nothing. There are also yeah, I don't know if it's rumors or it's talk that Penn Relays would invite schools from across the country to come in and challenge or beat the Jamaican schools.
Well,
Um,
remember Long Beach Poly?
yes, do you agree that maybe it's time, or do you agree any at all that the Jamaican school should be looking at the Jake's relays instead of the Penn Relays, or it's best to
It,
stick with the Penn Relays as
I
uh,
think that history and Penn Relays. I think here's my opinion on the Drake. It's in Iowa. That time of the year, it's the same weekend.
mhm,
You don't know what kind of weather you're going to get. You might have a snowstorm.
mhm.
You know, it's bad. People say it's bad enough at Penn's. We had 2 great days
Yes, sir.
this year, even three, because even though the last day was rain, I
It was
remember
rain. It wasn't cold.
standing out, getting
Yeah.
soaked, getting interviews for Irie with in that hurdle race. But I was like, this is crazy.
Maxwell in the comment section is saying or is asking, why can't you bring in the teams from the south of the country?
I mean, that's an easy one, right?
Yeah, I know what
It,
you're gonna say. Go ahead.
it's a state meet, right? The state series. At least let me speak on behalf of Florida, right? In Florida, you have the state series, which begins early April and ends first week of May. And during that time, you cannot run in any other meets because your seeding must be matched from what you have from the state series. So if you have a 2 week in between regionals, I mean the districts and regionals, and you run a meet in between, you're throwing off that seeding structure and you become ineligible. So once that state series begin in early April, you cannot run anywhere else. And it doesn't make sense you risk going to a relay meet at that time to come back to your state meet. So that's one of the biggest reasons why you don't see teams from Florida.
And even on the college level, you don't see some teams because it's exams.
Right.
They don't
Mhm.
they don't come on exams. And then even when we talk about going to the international, there's a lot of teams that wanted to come that couldn't come to the international showcase because they had the CXS exams.
Joe, earlier you spoke about Quincy Wilson in that interview when he said, Bullis, his Bullis team was beaten fair and square.
Hmm.
I found the interview. Let us, before we close off, because we're just about wrapping up now, let's listen to that interview with Quincy Wilson. I did this interview. We visited his school, Bullis, in Maryland, just before that
Yes,
um,
practice. Yep.
East Coast International Showcase.
I mean, at the end of the day, it's a race. At the end of the day, the best person wins. That's the thing about track. That's why I like it. It's competitive. You step on the track, you can't say that somebody should have won if someone doesn't end up at first place. So I feel like I give my hats off to Kingston College who beat us because, I mean, they won fair and square. There wasn't nobody fumbling or stumbling on the track this year. It was a straight up race, and I give my congrats. But like I said, I still have another year. He still has another 2 years, so we're coming back next year even harder than we were. Like I said, 43.99 is great. But at the end of the day, I know I had great other teammates that he split 45 as well. So I know I had great teammates that was helping me. I couldn't have done it by myself. You seen the year before we were stumbling, but I still split 44s and we weren't able to get the job done. It all means something, but as a team, it means great when the whole team is running great together. And I've seen each and every one of us run the fastest split that we ever run. So like I said, I congratulate to my team, Kingston College, anybody that was in that race, because I looked at it, 5th place was 3:08. That's crazy. I don't know if there's been a race that fast overall ever. So I know there's been a 3:03 team from Calabar, but I know that also I don't know if there was 5 teams that ran under 3:08 before. And so congrats and a salute. And like I said, America's back in the fight. We're back in there. We're ready to compete.
You heard it from Quincy. He spoke very well, and he said that the fifth place team was 308. And I remember just maybe a few years ago, well, not a few years ago, maybe up to 10 years ago, Coach Vaughn and Joe, when a school got below 210, 210 was a mark in Jamaica. And when a school ran below 210, it was a big thing, big thing. And from 210, we would have seen how fast Calabar had gone. Um, that's it basically for us tonight. But just before we go, Coach Vaughn, um, 30 seconds. Penn Relays. i- is there anything you would want to see, any rule you would want to see change for next year or going forward?
No, I think the meet is perfect how it is. I'm seeing some changes on the side where they're looking at more international competition. They're switching up some things here and there, and they kind of alluded to it with the world USA versus the world back then, but they're obviously tweaking it with the switch from the boys on the final on the Friday this year to the girls on the Saturday and going back and forth. I think
I
they're
don't
really
like
trying
that.
to find. Yeah, that throws off our schedule a little bit. but it's definitely something that they're trying to tweak to make it more and more perfect. But I think the meet is just fine as it is. I just love how they reel off so many races back to back to back. I just love it.
So the problem with that, the schedule's not exactly as fair because when you look at, if you run on Friday, Thursday, Friday, it's a little bit easier. If you're a 4-8 runner and you're running on Friday, Saturday, it's wicked on a Saturday. You have to run it 2 4s, and you know what I mean. It's a lot of races, but that's the way the schedule's always been. I just know that they're switching it up, but I can see a big difference between when the boys run on Friday,
Saturday.
Saturday,
Yeah.
as opposed to Thursday, Friday. Saturday, I never used to be able to walk through that tunnel down there without being packed. But
Yeah.
it's different. I'm not, and I coach girls, so I used to coach girls. So I'm not just saying that because of it. I just know what the popularity is, but I do want to say too, while we're on here talking about 4x4, respect to Heidel girls
Mm-hmm.
setting that Penn relay record 3:30. You know,
Yeah,
That-
and I think for Heidel and Kingston College, both teams going 4 for 4, which has not been done in over 50 years. To have two teams do it at the same time, that was quite
yes,
quote
and
unquote.
then the other thing I want to say about, since we're on Penn relays, is you can't dismiss the Jamaicans in the field events.
Mm.
Well, yes, you definitely can't.
You can't. I mean, even winning the javelin, the girl from Excelsior, the javelin. I mean, just a lot of field events. They almost swept the field events all the way through, boys and girls.
Hmm. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Yep, I got
Before
a
we
big
go,
weekend ahead of me that I just found
mhm,
out about. So,
before we go, Maxwell again saying the same thing will happen to Quincy next year. You all know it's not a fair fight. Laugh out loud. That's where we leave it tonight. And as I said before we started at the top of the discussion, it was a discussion on should a US team or US school team, high school team that is, receive goal watches at the Penn Relays, even if they don't win their race. That was the discussion tonight. Some people say it's a controversial rule that awards goal watches to the first American school regardless of where they finish, whereas a Jamaican school will have to win to get their plaque and goal watches. That's where we leave the discussion for tonight. Until next time, take care.
All right.